anyway, we'll talk about how we can accept the challenge. 2/3 of the carbon that used to be in the soil, as we talked about, 5% down to 1.5%, due to industrial agriculture, is now in the atmosphere. It doesn't go away. And basically, we talked about those figures. The very simple part of the solution, there are other things we can do as well, but part of the solution is put the carbon back from where it came, and that's how we farm, basically. Step into the carbon cycle. You can't make new carbon. Same carbon molecules have always been here. They're in the soil, they're in living things, or they're in the atmosphere, and the largest storehouse is the soil, and 2/3 of what was in the soil is now in the atmosphere. And when we build carbon, you can't make new carbon. You stepped into the carbon cycle and sequestered what otherwise would have been in the atmosphere. So it's direct and very potent carbon sequestration when you do that. It's the biggest single thing we can do. That's why it needs to be legislated for, to encourage it as fast as possible. It's the biggest change we can make. It's interesting, we've got, I don't know if he's arrived yet, but we've got, there's a guy called Sadhguru, who's a sort of Indian mystic who's really embraced the Save Soil movement. And he's got 4 billion followers, this bloke. He did this tour riding on a bike around multiple countries. But he's got a young disciple, his name's Sahil, who's now biking around the world, carrying that message. He's already done one 15,000-kilometre bike ride around India. He's got millions of followers as well in terms of social media followers. And now he started in Bundaberg, and he's currently in Inverell, and they're driving him over for an interview with me at lunchtime today. But he's part of that whole group that is just frantically going around sharing the message that's called the Safe Soil Movement and telling this exact same story. It's so important that we understand the significance of it. Even if we look, I mentioned that simple thing of there being 2 types of carbon and how important it is to bring that fungi to bacteria ratio as a planet-saving ratio, because you've got to have fungi to make the stable humus that will stay there for 35 years. The fungi take the bacterial humus and weave it in with the hyphae and wrap it around with clay and create the stable humus that stays there and out of the atmosphere for at least 35 years, longer than certainly I'll be here. For many of us won't be here 35 years' time. But even if you're going to compost, the greatest finding in composting science comes from Siegfried Lübke, the composting genius out of Austria, who has developed this thing called CMC, controlled microbial composting. And there are several parts of that strategy, which is now the most popular commercial composting strategy, is the addition of 6% of a friable high clay soil in that compost, so that when you create the humus, and if you're doing the home garden, you've got to do this. If you're going to the effort of composting, why not create a humus that's going to be here longer than you are, if you've gone to that effort? And that's putting 6% of a friable, and you can't take a big block of clay and put it in. It's got to be a friable clay-based soil that the fungi can then utilise and build the clay and humus together and create that stability. Really important finding in composting. I never make a compost without some kind of clay, and often if you need phosphate, and only if you need phosphate, you can use a material called soft rock phosphate, which is actually a colloidal clay-based phosphate, and there's your clay. Plus, of course, you actually break apart the phosphate and calcium and make them available during that hothouse process of composting. And so and there's all trace minerals in there as well, so you've got that benefit along with that clay component that gives you that stable humus. So let's talk about a few humus building hints. Don't burn down your cover crop. So basically, a lot of people will do a cover crop, which has obviously got benefits during the cover cropping process, but it's also got benefits afterwards. And when we talk about no-till versus minimum till, I'm a huge fan that minimum till is actually of more value. It's all about this decision you make at the time. But the point is, if you can gently work into what's called the A horizon, which is using things like a Howard rotavator or whatever, and scuff land and just get some soil contact onto that organic matter, it's not just about the fact that you're then feeding the soil life with that food sort of thing, but it's also about the minerals that are present, because there are 3 minerals that have a cycle. There's a carbon cycle, a sulphur cycle, and a nitrogen cycle. And sulphur is huge. Sulphur is this neglected mineral that I just see deficiencies everywhere. We made a mistake with sulphur. So you used to get your sulphur for nothing. It came down in the rain from sulfur dioxide emissions, and that was called acid rain, and there were whole waterways that died. One of the Great Lakes was devoid of life. We had forests die in Europe, so we banned sulfur emissions completely. So we don't get it for free anymore, and the only thing that holds its humus, and we lost 2/3 of our humus, so what's going to happen to sulfur unless you put it on? There's nothing much to hold it, and you're not getting it for free anymore. So we sort of lost the plot on that. Now it's recognised we shouldn't have cut emissions 100%, we should have cut them 80% and keep getting that 20% of free sulphur, because what we're realising increasingly is that resilience, which is the biggest, most important word in the brave new world of climate change farming with more and more extremes, you've got to be resilient, and the biggest, most important single mineral in resilience is sulphur. There's sulphur-based compounds everywhere in plant resilience. We need sulphur, and everyone needs it. I'm convinced, watch this space and see if I'm right, that pasture dieback is linked to a sulphur deficiency. Now, there were always mealybugs and ground peels, the two things that have been linked. Why have they suddenly become this huge issue? Because there's not all the sulphur-based compounds that allow the protective capacity of that plant to flourish, and hence you've got dieback, but we'll see whether that's accurate or not. So we want to turn it in, and the crop's filled with carbon, nitrogen, and sulphur, they're fairly abundant minerals. We want to turn them back into soil. We don't want them to off-gas when we burn them off with the herbicide. So another reason to not burn off your cover crop. This idea of adding legumes, let's talk about the role, it's called an ecosystem role of legumes in the scheme of things. Now, number one is that they need to have little nodules, and we'll talk about why they don't have them in many instances, little nodules on the roots that house little bacteria called rhizobium, and rhizobium picks nitrogen from the atmosphere, feed the plant its nitrogen, and then when they've got their sufficient protein, this is the clover or whatever, then they give up some of that nitrogen to the plant beside them. So it's a huge reason to build legumes into your, like I work in Saskatchewan and Canada, and you do not plant a cereal crop without a legume under it. You've got more than one is better with low-growing clovers. Because what are you getting from the clover? What's your cash crop getting from that plant beside it? Nitrogen, number one, if you've got nodules. And so this is the concept of what's called a functioning legume, and I'll explain that in a moment. Number two is that legumes are unique, well, not unique, because there's a couple of other plants that do it, including buckwheat, but they release an acid exudate into the soil. And that acid exudate is no different, except it's gentler than us taking phosphate, calcium phosphate, rock phosphate, and treating it with an acid to break the bond between calcium and phosphate. Well, this is happening much more gently, and it trickle feeds your locked up calcium phosphate, which is every bit of soluble phosphate you ever put in there is locked up with calcium, and you want it, the two most important minerals for the most important process, photosynthesis. You want to break them apart, and that's what a legume with its acid exudates does. So you're getting calcium, you're getting phosphate for the cereal crop next to it, you're getting nitrogen, the three important minerals, but fourth, arguably most important, is that if you take that little meter that measures your fungi to bacteria ratio, measure under a ryegrass and measure under a clover, you will have double, try it yourself, double the levels of fungi, because fungi love the acid exudate. So they're hanging out, breeding up under that. But all of that means nothing if it's not a functioning legume. So what's a functioning legume? And this is where you've got to get down on your knees and dig and have a look. If you've got an agronomist and he hasn't got dirt under his nails, get rid of him. He's a waste of space. You've got to be in there and having a look. So what are we talking about? Basically, the plant's got to have nodules for a start. If you've got no nodules, I'll just explain why none of that happening. But first of all, I'll say first it's got to have nodules. Then it's got to have this reddish pigment, which is called leg hemoglobin, inside those nodules. So you cut it with a pocket knife, or you have small nodules, you'll have a white sheet of paper and squash it, and you want a reddish brown stain there, pinkish red stain. And if you haven't got that, it's a non-functioning legume. And if you haven't got that red colour, then none of those things I described are happening. There's no nitrogen fixation, there's no acid exudate, there's no feeding of fungi, which love the acid exudate, there's no breaking of calcium phosphate, all the benefits. You've got a parasite piece of rubbish sitting in your paddock, and that's half of the paddocks I walk. You say, oh, I've got legumes in here, but they're not working, mate. There's no nodules on them, well, there's no red inside the nodules. So what determines those two things? Sulphur. There are two other minerals, but sulphur's the biggest player in that first thing of whether or not you've got nodules. Low sulphur soils, you've got no nodulation. So sulphur's really important because no one takes care of it. That's for the nodules. And then the red colour is a little trace mineral. No, it's a leachable anion, just like boron and sulphur leach, because they can only store on humus, because humus has got the positive little Velcro sites that grab these anions. So boron, sulphur are anions, only stored on humus, and so is molybdenum. Molybdenum, this little obscure trace mineral, 0.5 part per million is all you need. If you haven't got an 80% of you don't have it, because we know we're testing all over and the science is there. 80% of soils are molybdenum deficient because you don't have the humus and you don't put it back. You take it off with every crop. No one puts it back. So that's the key to the red pigment. If there's no red pigment, here's why there's no acid exudate, which means there's no calcium phosphate and no fungi because of the acid exudate, because plants have got this thing called, it's called the electrical balance of the plant. The plant senses, I want some calcium. It knows calcium because of the size, and so somehow it senses, yeah, that big ball is calcium, the biggest ball, so I'll take some of that calcium. But when it takes calcium or magnesium or potassium or whatever, it has to balance itself. It's taking a cation, it's got to spit out a cation. Well, why would you take in calcium and spit out another mineral that's of value, like potassium or magnesium? So what you spit out is a mineral that has no value, and the mineral's called hydrogen. It's got no food value. And hydrogen is the acid mineral. And so what you're measuring when you look at your soil pH and it's 5.4 when it should be 6.4, the plant's taken all the calcium, magnesium, potassium, the things that govern pH, and replaced them with hydrogen, the acid mineral. You've got an empty pantry, you've got an empty fuel tank. That's what pH is telling you. So, but when the plant takes in the ammonium ion, so there's ammonium and nitrate. Nitrate's an anion, ammonium's a cation. That's a cation. You're making a lot of it. You're pulling it from the atmosphere and making it, fill up your own protein quotes and then give it away. But because you're taking in ammonium constantly, you're releasing that hydrogen acid exudate. That's what the exudate is. And if you haven't got the red pigment, see why is molybdenum important? Because there's an enzyme that grabs the gas, turns it into ammonium nitrogen in the soil from the gas in the atmosphere, nitrous oxide in the atmosphere. That enzyme's made from molybdenum. If you haven't got it, you can't do it. And so that's the deal. The red pigment means you've got it and you're fixing nitrogen. If there's no red pigment, you're not. And if you're fixing nitrogen, then you're releasing the acid because you're taking in the ammonium, nitrogen, balancing yourself by spitting out the hydrogen. The hydrogen then breaks the bond between calcium and phosphate, two most important minerals for the most important process there for your cereal crop. And of course, it feeds the fungi. And none of that happens if you don't have that red pigment or you don't have nodules. Sulphur and molybdenum. Sulphur for the nodules. And you can do 100 grams of sodium molybdate with a bit of fulvic acid as a foliar spray, and you've got red pigment, you've got a functioning legume. And that's huge if you're trying to change your fungi. It's the cheapest and most efficient way to improve your all-important fungi to bacteria ratio. So bacteria spit out a sticky substance, create tiny little aggregates. Fungi take them and wrap them with their hyphae into a much bigger granule. That's crumb structure. That's the soil that can breathe. Your most important role, gas exchange, is managed because you fixed your fungi to bacteria ratio. You created crumbs that allows the oxygen to come in, that allows earthworms to move freely through that soil, allows nematodes, the good guys, 80% of the good guys, to move freely through that soil. In comes the water. You've got infiltration. The whole thing falls into place if you can manage gas exchange better. We're going to talk about cover crops. First of all, we're going to refer back to that definition of science in Webster's dictionary, which was adherence to natural laws and principles. So basically, the deal is you've got a perfect blueprint, a mind-bogglingly, amazing phenomenon called nature, and we're learning from nature. And so if we ask the question, referring to that definition, okay, what was the most productive area ever in the history of mankind, and why was it so productive? When you look at that story, you find that second was the Nile Valley, was unbelievably productive in terms of how much biomass per square metre was produced there for thousands of years until we dammed it, and then we blew that whole thing because every time it flooded, all those floodplains were covered in that rich, nutrient-rich silt, and that doesn't happen anymore. But the first most productive, by far, nothing comes close, were the Great Plains in the US. And why were they so productive? Why did they produce more biomass for thousands and thousands of years than any other area per square metre, without urea, without any kind of aid? What was the secret? The secret was huge herds of buffalo. And the buffalo would come in a predator effect. You weren't choosy. You had another head next to you as you're all gobbling. And believe me, when you look at the research on how fast, if you can combine intelligent grazing, cell grazing, mob grazing with multiple species injected into that pasture. I mean, Christine Jones should win the Medal of Australia for her research, that she's done so much of it, showing there's no way better to move than humus. Animals build humus more rapidly than any other known way if they're managed correctly. So there's a scientist working with, from Brazil, who's worked with cover crops for 32 years, Ademir Caligari is his name, and basically he's come up with this finding that has been, people were struggling to understand how it could possibly be working. But what he's shown is if you can include 5 species in a cover crop, something quite magical happens. And no one understood for a while why, until the US Ag Department had a closer look, and I'll explain their discovery. His finding was that you need to include 5 species: grasses, cereals, brassicas, legumes, and this is the one, looks like it's pronounced chinopods, but it's actually pronounced chenopods, so the plant scientists tell me. Chenopods. And chenopods is a quite small group of plants. It includes everything in the beet family, and often in some countries where sugar beet's a commercial crop, that's your cheap seed. Sugar beet, quinoa, amaranth, and spinach. But it's only 1% you need in your cover crop to have this effect. And so the head of the Soil Health Division of the USDA went out actually to this group that call themselves the Carbon Cowboys that Ademir Caligari was working with, and he taught them this concept. And they said, look, we're seeing, it's like 4 cover crops went in there. We're seeing this complete change in soil structure. You can push a penetrometer to the end after just one cover cropping cycle. It's unparalleled what is happening. So they looked and they noticed that definitely there's this change, this very rapid change happening when you've got the 5 species in the blend, and the more the merrier, like you might have 4 of each sort of thing would be an ideal scenario. And what they discovered was only when the 5 families, doesn't happen with 4, still 4 is better than 1, but only when the 5 species are there, the plant roots begin messaging each other, and the roots begin pouring out substances called phenolic compounds into the soil. Now, phenolic compounds are the most powerful plant-based antioxidants in our diet. So they're the things that are in blueberries, and they're in green tea and so forth, and dark chocolate are phenolic compounds. Really, really powerful antioxidant. It turns out, just like they affect all of our cells in a very beneficial way, they put soil life into hyperdrive. Only when the 5 species, the plant roots, messaging each other and start pouring out this very measurable quantity of phenolic compounds into the soil, and the soil life goes into hyperdrive. So it's a hell of a finding. It's massively important to understand. You've got to do it yourself to get excited. So I grew ginger amongst other crops at the local farm, and I had an area that had been compacted by cattle over years, and I said, I need a new ginger patch. So I went over there, penetrometer, you've got the little meter on the top telling you how much pressure it takes, and clonk at about this depth, hard pan at about 8 to 10 inches, all over that patch. And so I said, right, I'm doing one of these. So I was in New South Wales touring, doing some seminar, and I went to 5 different rural stores because I wanted clean seed without the fungicide treatment on it, because I'm going to put microbial fungi on those seeds and so forth. And I had to compromise and take a couple. I couldn't get lucerne seed. It wasn't blue or whatever colour with the fungicide on it. So I sort of compromised, but I put microbial fungi on them, and this product called Root and Shoot, which is an incredible seed treatment, that combination. And we got rain straight after this beautiful cover crop. And, like 4 or 5 months, and then I turned it in, and then I go back before I plant the ginger, and woof. And then right to the bottom of everywhere where you've done it, you could just go woof to the bottom, really quite simply, just change the whole sort. Then you can step outside where the cover was, clonk. Then and then you get excited about the potential. You need to see these things for yourself to recognise how important they can be. So amongst that blend of those varieties, there's 2 of them that you really have to be careful with. You never go more than 5 to 6% of the brassica component, and that can be obviously things like tillage radish, which is just daikon radish with a fancy name, canola, a whole bunch of things that fall under the brassica range, forage kale and so forth. But you only want 6% because they pour out a substance called isocyanates that stop mycorrhizal fungi. They don't colonise mycorrhizal fungi, and if you've got a whole bunch of them, then the plant next to them won't have mycorrhizal fungi. So you don't want more than 5 to 6% in that blend, and just 1%. I put 2%. I've just got a commercial silver beet seed in that 5 species blend, but I had like 20 species in total of these 5 families, and what an amazing change. But 1%, I put 2% just to be sure that I got 1% come up, but I got at least 1% did. And you can use quinoa as what Graeme Sait has a company called Down Under, or Covers Down Under, or Down Under Covers. Down Under Covers, yeah. And it's a great, they produce their own seed, and it's all done with this regenerative approach. So it's very good quality seed. But they usually use quinoa as their quinopod component. Oh, they're in that family. There's saltbushes in the family. Oh, that's interesting. I mean, there are some weeds that fall into that, like I'm trying to think of the fat hen. Fat hen's the one which we've got on the farm there, a little bit of it. But the fat hen is a quinopod, and if you've got you only want 1%, but if you've got it there, well, that's covered from that perspective. So discovering humates, who uses humic and fulvic acid? There's a few people that have discovered them. So that humic and fulvic acid are natural acids, not some kind of man-made construct. They're what are found. They're what you produce when you compost, and the higher the quality of the compost, the higher the level of those natural acids produced by the biology that are present in that compost. And it turns out you can extract those. It's sort of like the essence of why humus works, because they do very much the same things as humus does, but you can extract them from ancient organic matter in the form of certain types of brown coal, and these two acids are wonderful tools. Humic acid is really important amongst the two acids because humic acid is the most powerful known fungal stimulant. So if you want a fungi back in your soil, you utilise humic acid in your programs. It's this very long-chain carbohydrates that fungi absolutely love. The bacteria eat simple sugars, simple things, and fulvic acid, which is much smaller and much simpler, is a really powerful bacterial stimulant, but humic acid is what feeds fungi. And many of you, if you do your little test and you want to put on your Christmas tree list a microbiometer, it's under $300, but wonderful tool to just find out where you're at and find out what works. You do something, you try some kind of change, like you put some legumes into your pasture, and then you measure, have I improved my fungal to bacteria ratio? And you can see what's working and what's not. Really, really powerful little tool. So humic acid is really important. Embracing compost. I mean, the story of compost and its value is not, people often think, oh yeah, it's the nutrients. Well, there's a role of those nutrients have all been complexed with humic and fulvic acid that's major in compost, natural humic and fulvic that collate and magnify and complex those minerals so that they don't leach so readily. That's part of the story. But the biggest part of what you're introducing with the compost is that all-important biodiversity. A compost will have 30,000 different creatures in a teaspoon, 5 billion in total, but 30,000 different species. And that's bringing back a whole bunch of things that are not in your soil anymore. Anyway, what they put in effectively was this 1 tonne of compost. And when you do the sums, what they actually introduced into those multiple sites in terms of carbon should have been a 0.15% increase. If you measured your soil before and 3 years later you measured again, you put the equivalent of 0.15% with that 3 tonnes you put in over 3 years. The average increase was 1.35%, 9 times more than what you put in there. How the hell is that happening? That, my friends, is how important compost is to save the day by building humus, because you reintroduced, you reclaimed your soil's capacity with that diversity to take the crop, some of the sugars that are pumped down, to take the crop residues and the roots that are dying off constantly, which roots do, and convert them into humus. You reclaimed your humus producing capacity of your soil with that compost, and that is what the most important single thing of compost. Every council should be composting everything. Every person who can compost should be composting, and you get excited when you compost. I was working with a Broadacre group every year, going to a talk up at Rockhampton. They had 3 cyclones or 3 massive flood events in 3 years, and we were up there and we couldn't hire the CWA hall that day for the talk, and then we go out and have a look around some of the farms. We have a morning and talking about stuff in the hall, and we couldn't hire it. So there's a permaculture guy there, and he's just got a 20-acre block down by Yeppoon, but he just likes to be in the Broadacre group. He said, I've got a teaching facility on the top. It can seat 100 people underneath a big covered area. So we said, we'll go down there and have a look and do the talk. So we were down at Yeppoon, and this low formed off the coast while I was talking, and that low, I just got home and the low turned into a Category 4 cyclone in 24 hours, which has never happened in recorded history, but it happened 2 months later off Mexico. And this is part of climate change. And so he got hit a 4th time, this friend of mine, this Broadacre farmer. So I rang him to commiserate. He said, this is about how good, because he's really got into composting in the last 5 years. And it's how you start to see the glass half full when you compost. Because I rang him to commiserate, and he says, yeah, it was bad. There's trees down everywhere. Oh my God, just to see how much stuff I've got to compost now. You start to see the positives. And once you compost, it's almost addictive. It's so cool. When you see what it can do for your soils, it's a really good thing to do. So